The morning I signed the papers on the lake house, I poured myself a coffee, stood on the back deck, and just listened. Loons calling out across the water. A light wind coming in off Georgian Bay. Nothing else. I was 63 years old. I'd spent 31 years building a small lumber supply company out of Barrie, Ontario, starting with a used pickup truck and a client list I kept in a 3-ring binder. I had missed school plays and hockey tournaments and more Saturday mornings than I care to count, but I had also never missed a mortgage payment, never borrowed against what I didn't have, and never once cut a corner that would come back to bite a customer. When I sold the business in the spring, the buyer, a regional chain out of Sudbury, paid me just over $2 million for it. Not a fortune by any standard, but enough. Enough for the house on the water, enough to travel, enough to breathe. My wife Carol had passed 4 years earlier, pancreatic cancer, fast and cruel, the way that particular disease tends to be. After she was gone, the house in Barrie felt like a museum. I was the only visitor too, so I sold it, took what was left after the kids got their shares from her estate, and I started over. The lake house was in Honey Harbor, 3 bedrooms, a stone fireplace, a dock that needed one new plank at the far end. I fixed the plank myself the first weekend. I wasn't a man who liked sitting still. My son Kevin had not spoken to me in 11 years. That number still does something to me when I say it out loud. 11 years. His daughter, my granddaughter Emma, had been 6 when it started. She was 17 now. I had sent birthday cards every year, always with a little money tucked inside. I never knew if she received them. Kevin's wife, Brenda, had a way of making things disappear. The falling out, if you could call it that, happened at Carol's mother's funeral. Brenda made a comment about my business being a tax scheme. I told her she didn't know what she was talking about. Kevin sided with her, loudly. In the church parking lot, while the hearse was still idling at the curb, that was it. A switch flipped and they were gone. I had tried, for the first year or two, cards, calls, a letter I spent a week writing that Kevin never acknowledged. Then Carol got sick and I had other things to carry. Then she was gone. Then I built the years up like a wall, brick by brick, until the weight of it was something I had learned to move around rather than through. I settled into Honey Harbor through the summer. My neighbor across the road, a retired teacher named Walt, who I'd met at the hardware store, became a regular for evening beers on the dock. I started sleeping 8 hours for the first time in decades. I joined a men's group at the Legion in Midland on Thursday evenings. I was okay, more than okay actually. A local paper did a small feature on me in August. Barrie entrepreneur trades lumber for lake life. Nothing dramatic. A photo of me on the dock with a cup of coffee. A few quotes about the business. A line about the sale price. The journalist had looked it up on the public registry. 2.1 million, she said. Was that accurate? I told her it was close enough. The story ran on a Friday. Kevin called the following Tuesday. I stared at the name on my phone screen for 3 full rings. Part of me thought it might be a misdial. Part of me knew it wasn't. Dad. His voice was the same, slightly nasal. The way he always sounded when he was working up to something. Kevin. I saw the article. I didn't say anything. I let the silence sit there between us like something solid. We've been meaning to reach out, he said. Brenda and I both. Things have been hard, you know how it is, but we've been thinking about you. I let him talk for about 4 minutes before I said anything. He covered a lot of ground, the years gone by, how time flies, how family is family at the end of the day. He mentioned Emma twice, in a way that felt like he was saving her for the end, a card held in reserve. We'd love to come see the new place, he finally said. When were you thinking? Actually. He paused. A particular kind of pause, the kind that has been rehearsed. We're in a bit of a rough patch right now, Brenda and I. The shop she was running didn't make it through COVID, and we've got some debt we're working through. We thought maybe for the next few months, if you had the space. I heard Brenda's voice in the background, low and quick. "We thought maybe we could stay for a bit while we get back on our feet." I was quiet for a moment. "The drive from Barrie isn't bad," I said. "Come for lunch on Sunday and we'll talk." I hung up and sat with my coffee until it went cold. I knew what this was. I had known it the moment I saw Kevin's name on the screen. A $2 million sale price in a regional newspaper, and suddenly, 11 years of silence had an expiry date. What I had to decide was what I was going to do about it. I called my lawyer that afternoon, a woman named Patricia Okafor, sharp as anyone I'd ever worked with, who had handled my business sale and knew every corner of my financial situation. I told her what had happened. She listened, without interrupting, which is one of the things I appreciated about her. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking I'd like to know what I'm walking into before they get here." She told me she'd make some calls. What she found wasn't a surprise exactly, but it was worse than I had expected. Kevin and Brenda had a second mortgage on their house in Barrie, taken out 2 years ago. Brenda's gift shop had indeed closed. There was a collections notice on record, a small claims judgment from a supplier, and there was something else, a note Patricia flagged carefully. Kevin had recently incorporated a numbered company, no stated purpose, no assets on file. Just a shell, created 3 months ago. "That's interesting," I said. "It is," she agreed. "It doesn't mean anything on its own, but it's worth knowing." I thanked her and spent the rest of the evening on the dock, watching the sun go down behind the tree line. They arrived Sunday in a Highlander that was newer than their financial situation suggested. Kevin had put on weight. He carried it differently than I remembered. Heavier in the face, a particular kind of tiredness around the eyes that I recognized from my own reflection in the years after Carol died. Brenda stepped out of the passenger side in a linen blazer and looked at the house the way a person looks at something they're trying to appraise. Emma was in the back seat. I hadn't expected her. She stepped out slowly, like she wasn't sure of her welcome. She was tall, dark-haired like her mother, with Carol's eyes, that specific shade of gray that always caught me off guard. She looked at me carefully. "Hi, Grandpa," she said. It took me a moment to find my voice. "Hi, sweetheart." We had lunch on the deck. I had made a proper effort. A brisket I'd started the night before, roasted potatoes, a cucumber salad Carol used to make. Brenda commented that the house must have cost a fortune. I told her the market up here was still reasonable if you knew where to look. Kevin talked about the business. His version was sympathetic, a story about bad timing and a difficult economy and a few suppliers who hadn't played fair. Brenda said almost nothing but watched everything. She watched me eat. She watched the water. She watched the door to the house when I went inside to refill the water pitcher. Emma helped me clear the plates. At the kitchen sink, she spoke quietly without looking at me. "I got every birthday card," she said. "I want you to know that. I kept them all in a box." I had to set down the plate I was holding. "She threw a couple out," Emma said. "I found them in the recycling before the truck came. I rescued them." A pause. "She doesn't know I know." I looked at her and she looked back at me, and I understood something in that moment about who this girl was. She had Carol in her. Not just the eyes, the stillness, the way of seeing. "I'm glad you came today," I said. "Me too," she said. "And then they're going to ask to stay. I just want you to be ready." She went back outside before I could answer. Kevin made the ask over coffee. He framed it carefully. Temporary. Just until the debt was restructured. 3 months at most, they wouldn't be any trouble. Brenda added that they could help with the upkeep, the yard, things like that. Kevin mentioned Emma's school was only 40 minutes from Midland. She could finish her last year from here. I nodded slowly. "I'd want to think about it," I said. "Give me until Thursday." Brenda's eyes went flat for just a moment before she smiled. "Of course," she said. "We completely understand." They left at 4. Emma hugged me at the car. Kevin shook my hand, which was somehow worse. Over the next 2 weeks, I thought very carefully about what I wanted to happen, not what I wanted to feel. I was 63 years old and had lost enough to know that feelings were weather, not geography. But what I wanted to actually result from this situation, for myself and, more specifically, for Emma. I called Patricia again. We talked for a long time. I also talked to a family lawyer named Rob, who Patricia recommended, a quiet man with an office in Aurelia, who specialized in estate matters and what he called family complexity. I told him about Emma, about the cards in the recycling, about what she'd said at the sink. He made notes without reacting. "She's 17, he said. Yes. In Ontario, a 17-year-old has significant rights in terms of expressing a custody preference." "I know," I said. "I've done some reading." He looked at me over his glasses. "What exactly are you planning?" "I'm planning to be her grandfather," I said. "I'm also planning to make sure my son understands there are consequences for what he's done. I just want to do both things at the same time without breaking anything that matters." He nodded slowly. "That's going to take some coordination." "I know," I said. "That's why I called you." I told Kevin on Thursday, as promised, that they could come. 3 months. I set out a few conditions. I wanted the basement suite rather than the main floor rooms. I needed my office space to remain private, and I asked that Kevin contribute $500 a month toward utilities, which I knew he'd agree to because it was reasonable enough not to refuse. They moved in on a Saturday in September. For the first 2 weeks, things were almost normal. Kevin helped stack the woodpile. Emma enrolled at a school in Penetanguishene and took the bus in the mornings. Brenda cooked once, something with chicken that was fine, and then mostly kept to herself. I watched all of this and said very little. Then the requests started. Small things first. Could Kevin borrow the truck on Wednesday? Could Brenda have the passcode for the storage room? Could Kevin have me co-sign a letter to his bank? Just a letter, not a loan, just confirming he had a stable address. I said no to the co-signing. Kevin pushed back gently. I said no again, and it wasn't gentle the second time. Then I found the document. I hadn't gone looking for it. I'd gone into the basement to check the water pressure gauge, which had been reading low, and Kevin's laptop was open on the folding table he'd set up as a desk. I didn't read what was on the screen. I didn't have to. I could see my name at the top of the page and the words "Power of Attorney," and below that the name of the numbered company Patricia had flagged. I took a photograph with my phone and walked back upstairs. That night I called Patricia and then Rob, and then I sat on the deck alone until midnight, listening to the bay. I thought about Carol. I thought about what she would say. She had loved Kevin in a way I sometimes couldn't access, a mother's specific love that didn't require reason, but she had also been the clearest-eyed person I ever knew. I think she would have been sad. I think she would have also said, "Don't let sentiment be the same thing as weakness." The next morning, I drove Emma to the bus stop. "How's school going?" I asked. "Good." She looked out the window. Mrs. Meeby, Pellerin, my English teacher. She asked me to submit something to the regional writing contest. She said I had real voice. "You do," I said. She looked at me. "How would you know? Your grandmother had it too. It's not something you can fake." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Grandpa, are they doing something they shouldn't be?" I kept my eyes on the road. "Why do you ask?" "Because my dad's been on the phone a lot, and my mom asked me last week what kind of medication you take. Said she was just curious." A pause. "She's never curious about people." I breathed through that for a moment. "Emma," I said carefully, "if I asked you to trust me for about 3 more weeks, could you do that?" She looked at me for a long time. "Yes," she said, "but I want to know what's happening after." "I'll tell you everything," I said. "I promise." I dropped her at the stop and watched the bus pull away, and then I drove to Aurelia to see Rob. The next 3 weeks were the longest of my life and also, strangely, some of the calmest. I had a plan. Having a plan, I found, is the thing that makes waiting bearable. Patricia had been busy. The numbered company, as it turned out, had been used to open a line of credit at a credit union in Newmarket. The application had listed as a business asset a property at my address in Honey Harbor, my property. Listed as an asset Kevin apparently intended to transfer to himself. Rob had spoken to a colleague at the Barry courthouse. I spoke to the OPP non-emergency line and asked a few careful questions, which led to a conversation with a financial crimes officer named Sergeant Whitmore, who was, to his credit, very thorough. I also spoke to my neighbor Walt, who had, it turned out, been a high school principal for 22 years and had more composure in difficult situations than most people I had ever met. "I'd like to ask a favor," I told him. "Name it," he said. "I'm having some people over for dinner in a few weeks. I'd like you to be there." He looked at me steadily. "Is this the kind of dinner where things get said out loud?" "Yes," I said. "I'll bring the wine," he said. I invited Kevin and Brenda to dinner on a Thursday evening in October. I told Kevin I wanted to talk about the next steps, what happened when the 3 months were up, what I was thinking. He came to the table looking relaxed. Brenda wore the linen blazer again. Walt was already seated when they came in. I had also asked Patricia to join us, which I had not mentioned to Kevin in advance. She arrived at 6:15 and sat at the far end of the table with a folder in front of her. Kevin's eyes moved to Patricia and then to me. "Dad," he said carefully, "who's this?" "My lawyer," I said. "Sit down, Kevin." Brenda looked at the folder. Something shifted in her face. I let them get settled. I poured water. I had made a chicken and wild rice dish, something straightforward because I wanted the food to be an afterthought. "I want to talk about what you've been doing," I said. "Not what you've been saying, what you've been actually doing." I walked through it calmly. The numbered company. The credit union application. My address listed as a business asset without my knowledge or consent. The power of attorney document on Kevin's laptop. The questions Brenda had been asking about my medications. Kevin started to speak 3 times and stopped himself each time. Brenda tried once. "You went through his computer." "I went to check the water pressure," I said. The screen was open. I didn't touch the laptop. I took a photograph of what was visible. "That's not legal, Patricia," I said. "Can you speak to that?" Patricia spoke to it. She was concise and precise and left very little room. She also mentioned, at the appropriate moment, that the financial crimes officer from the OPP had been provided with the documentation and had found it sufficient to open a preliminary review. Kevin's face went the color of old plaster. "I haven't done anything illegal," he said. "The company was. I don't care what it was," I said. "I care what it was for. And I think you know what I mean." Brenda said nothing. Walt sat quietly through all of this, which was exactly what I needed. His presence was a kind of ballast, a witness who had no stake and no agenda, who was simply there. I let the silence settle. Then I said the part I had thought about the longest. "I'm not your retirement plan," I said. "I'm not your collateral. I spent 31 years building what I have, including more years without your mother than I ever expected to have, and I will not watch it get picked apart by people who couldn't be bothered to return a phone call for 11 years until they saw a number in a newspaper." Kevin looked at the table. "You're going to leave this house," I said, "both of you. I'll give you 2 weeks to find somewhere to go, because I'm not a cruel man, and because somewhere in you is still the boy I drove to hockey practice in the dark at 5:30 in the morning for 9 years. But you're leaving, and the company is being dissolved, and if Sergeant Whitmore's review finds what I think it might find, that's between you and the province." Brenda started to say something about Emma. "Emma," I said, "has already spoken to Rob, who is a family lawyer. She has expressed in writing that she would prefer to remain here and complete her final year of school. She's 17. Rob can explain what that means under Ontario family law if you'd like, but the short version is that her preference carries significant weight." The table was very quiet. "She can stay?" Kevin asked. His voice was different now, stripped of something. "She was never yours to negotiate with," I said. "She's a person. And yes, she can stay." Brenda pushed back her chair and walked to the front door without another word. Kevin sat for another moment, looking at something in the middle distance that I didn't try to read. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said finally. I believed him. I also knew that sorry and changed were two different things, and that at 63 I was no longer willing to pretend otherwise. "I know," I said. "Take care of yourself, Kevin." He left. Patricia packed up her folder. Walt washed the dishes, which I hadn't asked him to do, and we sat on the deck afterward with 2 fingers of scotch each and listened to the water. "You all right?" he asked. "Ask me in 6 months," I said. He nodded, which was the right answer to give. Emma came home from a study session at a friend's place at 9:30 and found me on the deck. She saw Walt leaving and the expression on my face and sat down in the chair across from me without taking her coat off. "It happened," she said. "Yes." "Are they gone?" 2 weeks, I said. "Then yes." She was quiet for a moment. "And me?" "You have a bedroom," I said. "And a grandfather. And a school that apparently has a very perceptive English teacher. That's a reasonable situation." She looked at me for a long moment with Carol's gray eyes. Then she reached across the table and put her hand over mine, and we sat there in the dark, listening to Georgian Bay breathe itself in and out, and I thought about all the years I had spent building something and how I had not known, until right now, what exactly it had been for. Emma got into the writing competition in the end. Regional finalist, the piece was about a man who taught himself to be patient and what patience made possible. She didn't tell me it was about me until after the results came in. I read it on the dock one morning in March with my coffee. The loons weren't back yet. The ice had only just gone out, but the light was different. That particular early spring light that comes off the water when the season is just deciding to turn. And I sat there until my cup was empty, and I thought, this is what you build toward, even when you don't know it. Not the money, not the house. This.